is there any correspondence?
I have none.
Agenda modification?
Yes, we do have some agenda modifications for this evening. There's a new 14D, a new 14E. Old 14D is now 14F. There's an addition to 14F number 1. A new 14F number 2 and 3. In addition to 15B number 2. In addition to 15B3. A new 15B5. A new 16. An old 16, 17, and 18 are now 17, 18, and 19.
At this time, we will have hearing of the public. If there's anyone that would like to give comment at this time, please start by stating your name and address. Okay, approval of the minutes from the prior meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Arndt? Yes. Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Metzler?
The treasurer's financial report.
Move to approve.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler? And Mr. Arndt? Yes.
Approval of invoices.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler? Mr. Arndt? Yes. Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Informational items.
You see 4 donations reported. The first one is an annual donation to fund for scholarship awards from the Geneva Eagles. Another $325 has been donated from various donors to Mark Grace P2P fund. And then our after-school discovery, as we consider donated, but it awarded a first place finish in the 2019 Fall Tree ID competition. And then in addition to that $100, another $50 for participation to be used to promote botanical and environmental science studies at GHS. And then for a second place finish in the 2021 Spring Wildflower ID competition and $50 for participation, another $100 award there for the same use.
Okay, legislative report.
Yes, thank you. The Safety and Violence Education Students Act, also known as the Safe Students Act, took effect on March 24th. Enacted as part of House Bill 123, the Act requires Ohio school districts to provide youth suicide awareness education and training and to implement threat mitigation efforts. Beginning with the 21-22 school year, districts must register with the Safer Ohio tip line for a permissible alternative. The Safer Ohio tip line is operated by the Ohio Department of Public Safety. It allows students and adults to anonymously share information with school officials and law enforcement about threats to student safety. Calls are answered by Ohio Homeland Security analysts. If action is needed, information is immediately forwarded to local school officials, law enforcement agencies, and the Ohio School Safety Center for follow-up. School districts can also contract with an alternative anonymous reporting program as long as it offers comparable services. Districts are required to submit data to the Ohio Departments of Education and Public Safety related to their participation in these reporting programs. The following data must be submitted at the end of each school year: the number and type of disciplinary actions taken in the previous year as a result of the reports received, the number and type of mental wellness referrals as a result of anonymous reports, the race and gender of the students subject to disciplinary actions and mental wellness referrals, and any other information that the ODE or the Department of Safety determines necessary. There are additional requirements beginning in the 23-24 school year regarding annual instruction and training. The American Rescue Plan signed into law March 11th is making a third round of ESSER funds available to school districts. The ESSER 3 funds allotted to the Geneva School District are $4.95 million. These funds may be spent through September 30th of 2024 on items related to learning loss and other COVID-related concerns in the schools, many of which I have talked about before. The Ohio House of Representatives sent to the Ohio Senate its version of the main operating budget bill, substitute House Bill 110, on April 21st. The House established a new school funding formula to be phased in over a 6-year period. The proposed formula, often referred to as the Fair School Funding Plan, contains the provisions of House Bill 1 with some modifications. Unlike current law, the plan funds students where they are educated rather than where they reside, resulting in direct funding for community schools, STEM school, open enrollment, and voucher students. The House also made several policy changes to House Bill 110, including extending to December 31st of 2021 the current temporary ability for boards of education and other public bodies to meet via electronic technology, which was set to expire July 1st. Eliminating DeWine's proposed requirement for high school students to complete the FAFSA in order to graduate from high school. Creating a legislative panel to oversee and review the distribution and spending of federal COVID emergency funds received by school districts and others, permitting high school juniors to opt out of the requirement to take the SAT or the ACT, maintaining DeWine's proposed requirement for school districts to offer and pay for student access to computer science curricula, maintaining DeWine's temporary prohibition on the establishment of new academic distress commissions through the 22-23 school year, and requiring a report on the cost effectiveness of the College Credit Plus program. House Bill 110 is currently pending in the Ohio Senate. During the week of April 26th, President Biden announced the American Families Plan, a $1.8 trillion proposal that includes $200 billion for universal preschool to all 3 and 4-year-olds. It provides $9 billion to address teacher shortages and educator development, and provides $45 billion for child nutrition programs. The ODE received approval from the United States Department of Agriculture to extend the free breakfast and free lunch to all students attending school on the National School Lunch Program through the entire 21-22 school year, so next year as well. In recently introduced legislation, there's House Bill 253 to prohibit school districts, among others, from requiring proof of a COVID-19 vaccination. House Bill 290 to establish a school funding formula that allows families to choose the option for all computed funding amounts associated with the student's education to follow them to the public or non-public school they attend. There is controversy about this bill. It's also known as the backpack bill, as it expresses the intent to develop legislation that provides a voucher for every student in Ohio to attend the public school, charter school, or private school of the family's choosing. So I imagine we're going to be hearing a lot more about that. And Senate Bill 166 to allow students, including those attending career technical schools, to use a driver's ed course towards graduation requirements, to establish the Student Pathways for Career Success Grant Program, to permit career technical schools to use remote or digital learning, to require the state of Ohio to create a program that establishes financial incentives for Ohio businesses to provide work-based learning experiences for students enrolled in career technical education programs, and requires joint vocational school districts to be included in revenue sharing agreements from a community reinvestment area agreement. And this is similar to House Bill 303 that was also introduced this month as well. Senate Bill 178 to reform the functions and responsibilities of the State Board of Education, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and the Department of Education. And finally, Senate Bill 181 introduced yesterday regarding student religious expression in interscholastic athletics and extracurricular activities, and this is pertaining to a religious apparel. And that's the legislative report.
Thank you. The ATEC report, the May board meeting for ATEC was held on Monday the 17th. There was great news at ATEC this month on 2 fronts. First is the Skills USA Ohio competition, mostly held virtually at the state level. The judges did come to the school to judge the culinary competitions in person. ATEC had 28 students that competed at state level. Of those, 6 won medals, 2 bronze, 2 silvers, and 2 golds. Of those 6, 3 were from Geneva. Carolyn Clovis earned a silver medal in culinary arts. Amber Bryan earned bronze in photography, and Grace Velasic earned bronze in nail care. The gold medal winners won in the mobile robotics category and will be competing nationally. This brings us to our second good news for the month. ATEC's Precision and Manufacturing class took home the championship in Best Engineer honors at the 2021 AWT Robotics Competition. AWT is Ohio's largest regional combat robotics competition. And the board was given a tour after our meeting on Monday in Meister Hall, and we saw the electricity lab, carpentry lab, computer design, and welding labs. We ended the tour of the precision engineering lab to see a demonstration of the robot. This small, fierce piece of metal managed to totally destroy a computer printer in about 2 minutes. They had a test room to protect the viewers from flying plastic and metal. It was a very impressive demonstration. The next big item on the agenda at ATEC is the Senior Awards Recognition, which will be held on May 28th at Lakeside High School.
I'm sorry, I meant to piggyback on Mrs. Metzler's legislative report.
Sure.
Just to let you know that the final testimony was delivered this past Monday to the Senate Finance Committee on the Fair School Funding Plan. The work group was only allotted 15 minutes total in which to quickly and concisely review the highlights of the most comprehensive, transparent, objectively determined needs-based school funding proposal in the memory of most seasoned State House observers, and providing rational, fact-based responses to questions, some of which were well formulated and appropriate, others of which were neither, and instead mostly self-serving and intended to discredit the claim. Now it will be up to the Senate to finally reveal its thoughts about the Fair School Funding Plan and or its own version of a school funding formula as it adopts its own version of the 2-year budget plan before the final decisions are made during the conference committee deliberations follow. And the only thing that has come out of the Senate so far, I think I mentioned last time, is to tweak the current SFPR. Basically, that's all we've been doing for the last 20 years is tweaking the formula that doesn't work. So the word around the State House is that the Senate plans to vote on its budget version no later than June 8th, which would allow for 2.5 weeks of conference committee discussions, which should be sufficient time to iron out any differences. So that's where things stand. I also want you to know that I went down to the State House on April 28th to deliver testimony to the Senate Primary and Secondary Education Committee. This is a much smaller committee than the Finance Committee. It's seven senators, one of which is our own Sandy O'Brien. The chairperson of that group, Andrew Brenner, was not in attendance. I was told that he was out celebrating the anniversary with his wife. Of the 6 members that started the session, 3 members left. Sandy O'Brien being the first one, about 20 minutes into what ended up being 3 hours and 25 minutes of testimony and question and answer. So I have no idea what prompted her to leave, but it was kind of disappointing that most of the testimony was delivered to 3 members, the vice chair and 2 other senators. So I don't know if that was a message from them or what, but again, it was extremely disappointing, especially that one of our own constituents was down there in Columbus delivering testimony, and she couldn't stick around for it. As far as I know, there were no other committees conducting hearings at that time. I had checked the Senate website for that information. So. Keep the pressure on your legislators.
Okay, report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. I'll begin with our Geneva Pride positives. And again, as we conclude this year, we're able to hold some of the activities we're used to at the school, so I'll be sharing a little bit of information about that. At Ostenburg Court and Geneva Clyde Spencer, state testing is complete for the year. Each building put forth their best effort to reach every student online to make sure they were assessed. Results are expected in June. Each building is wrapping up the year with various activities. 5th grade is visiting Geneva Middle School this week. The visit is the first step in putting students' minds at ease in their new surroundings come fall. All 3 buildings will have a 5th grade clap out, and we are so proud of our 5th grade students. We will miss them next year. End of the year's field day activities are planned to reinforce the SOAR expectations and to celebrate standing up for one another by playing safe and healthy. And Right to Read Week activities are being completed by various classrooms throughout the school year. The Geneva Elementary principals would like to wish everyone a happy and healthy summer. All students should continue to read throughout the summer, especially those in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade that will receive a new book of their choice in the mail every 2 weeks from the Kids Read Now program. So happy reading, Geneva. At Geneva Middle School, the Geneva Middle School 8th grade formal was held on May 6th with great success. Students enjoyed dinner, dancing, socialization, and a bit of normalcy thanks to the kindness of the folks at the Running Horse Farm. Thank you to Mrs. Metzler, our chaperones, and the 8th grade steering committee for helping to provide such a great opportunity for our students. Also at Geneva Middle School, they are hosting all 5th grade students this week for short tours of the middle school, visits to certain programs, and meet and greets with the teaching staff. We are excited to welcome our incoming 6th graders during the 2021-22 school year and wish to thank the transportation department, 5th grade teachers, middle school staff, and elementary administrators for helping to organize the trip. And finally, at Geneva Middle School, they were able to hold their first band concert of the year by utilizing the high school gymnasium to allow business message. The 6th, 7th, and 8th bands were presented separately, live streaming each of their respective concerts. Each group performed 2 songs showcasing their hard work throughout the school. Geneva Middle School wishes to thank the high school administration and custodial staff for allowing us to use the building, and Mr. Trevin and Ms. Rice for preparing the students for such a great concert. At Geneva High School, senior banners for the class of 2021 are now displayed in the downtown area of Geneva. We thank our numerous sponsors for their donations and assisting with this project. It's a wonderful way to honor our new graduates and show our pride in Geneva. Congratulations to the GHS class of 2021. The senior parade will take place on Wednesday, June 2nd, with a rain date of Thursday, June 3rd. Parade lineup will begin at the middle school at 5 p.m. Seniors have been invited to participate with 1 car per family and will be encouraged to decorate their cars. While we have many volunteers directing the cars for our lineup and along the parade route. The same route as last year will be used. Following the parade, we will be hosting our senior picnic to help offset the cost. Local businesses have graciously donated towards the cause. The Army has been invited and volunteered to provide some game activities. And finally, graduation will take place on the outside athletic field at Spire on Saturday, June 5th at 2 p.m. with a rain date of Sunday, June 6th at 2 p.m. There are no tickets needed and there is no limit to the number of guests that may attend. We are asking families to sit together and maintain social distancing. Once again, we have teachers read a short biography of the graduates, goals, and plans for the future as they walk across the stage. We also work with a number of school personnel to try and make this a very successful event. We reached out to Spire about transitioning back inside with the latest orders from the governor, but at this time we have not received any additional information.
So right now, we do plan to be outside for our graduation. We're hoping for great weather, and we'll be watching the weather very closely as that approaches. So that's it for my Geneva Pride positives. Okay. Yes.
May I ask a question on the Geneva Pride positives?
Yes.
The kids read now. Who pays for that?
We pay our wellness funds. That was one of the programs that also with the ESSER funds, so that something for intervention and enrichment to again provide that additional help, additional support to the students, and we focused on our kindergarten through 3rd grade students.
And is our school district included in the Dolly's Imaginary Library that's receives a sponsor and all the kids get 3 books?
No, not this year. I know there's been some talk about also getting enrolled in that program also.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I recommend a motion to accept the following revised replacement policies for board adoption. Policies numbers are listed.
I'm having a problem with the sound again here, so I don't know if you can hear.
Accept the following revised replacement policies for board adoption.
Eric, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Dan.
Sound is not working. So during your Geneva Pride positives, it went way up, and now I hear nothing. No, I can't hear anything. So the sound went, can you hear me? You can hear me? Can you put a thumbs up if you can hear me, Eric? Okay. So what happened is when you started giving your Geneva Pride positives, the sound went way up for us on Zoom. So I was able to turn it down, but now I can't hear anyone else. So we're having problems with the sound now.
Mr. Dana, he's making an adjustment. Can you hear me now?
I cannot hear you. Nothing. Very slightly. It's worse. I'm sorry. I've got my volume all the way up, so I cannot hear you.
I can't hear it either, so I'm with him.
Okay.
How about now?
I can hear Mr. Markajon.
Can you hear me, Mr. Dana?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
We're good. All right.
Okay. I recommend a motion to accept the following new revised replacement policies for board adoption. The policy numbers are listed below.
I'll second here, but I will just say we are not discussing policy 7450. Is that correct?
That's correct. We were in consultation for that policy. Mr. Lillie did like some of the language that was removed from that. And since it was part of our first reading, that's why I did a strike through that. We'll continue to look at that and may bring it back to the board at a later time.
And all of these policies are recommended by our council, correct? Or Neomen, is that correct?
That's correct. And they're all revisions. Again, some language and some laws that have changed both at the federal level and state level that they made all those revisions.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorfeld? Mr. Arndt?
No.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
And Ms. Fisher?
Yes. I recommend that we continue our membership in the Ohio High School Athletic Association for the Geneva High School and middle schools. It is agreed we will conduct our athletic program in accordance with the Constitution, bylaws, and regulations, interpretations, and decisions of the Ohio High School Athletic Association. New this year, our membership dues based on $50 per OHSAA sanctioned sport in which the high school participates. This resolution shall remain in effect for the 21-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Is there a reason they're now charging for this, or?
Yes, this year is the first year that they have the $50 per sport membership, and that's only at the high school level. They had sent some information, and I believe it was included in your packet. Traditionally, they rely on the tournament ticket sales for about 80% of their revenue. Their board met, and due to the COVID pandemic, obviously they did not meet some of those budgetary requirements that they have to continue to operate. So they're looking for a more sustainable model that they could incorporate, and that's why they looked at the $50 per sport for the high schools as a membership fee. They did put a cap on it, or said that it would range anywhere from $300 to $1,300 for schools, and in the future that they would not exceed more than $100 per sport. So they are thinking a little bit to the future, but I think this is their new method of continuing to operate and making sure that it's something that they can sustain their budget.
So how much will we owe for the sports that we're involved in?
By my count, we have 19 boys and girls varsity sports. So that would be $950 that we would pay next year.
And how does that compare to what we were paying in the past for those fees that we were owing before they instituted this membership fee?
I can't tell you the exact fee, but the only fees that we paid as listed in that letter would have been the golf green fees for district tournaments and the wrestling weight management fees. We don't have a bowling team, and there weren't any other tournament entry fees that we had to pay. But you have the list there of all the other things that we do receive and that they pay, and in addition, there's still no charge for the catastrophic insurance coverage for our student athletes.
I'm just trying to get a comparison of where we were and where we're going.
My concern with the whole organization is that there is no zero parent input, and the parent is the one that's also being in charge of the child that's participating in the sport, and we have no say in how this athletic association does business, but yet they're not even part of public schools. They're a complete separate entity, and they mandate to us how we do business. And I've seen some of the things that they mandate, and I think it breaks down teamwork. It breaks down cohesion. So I'm not a supporter of this organization, even though I have children who were athletes and they haven't participated in it. But going forward, I think it's imperative that we get local people who understand sports and have them involved in what regulations are put down to us from the state, i.e. the Athletic Association. Thank you.
Any other comments? Roll call, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Arndt,
No.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes,
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
I recommend the board approve the following student as having met requirements for early graduation. Hannah Berg.
Second.
Discussion?
I will say that this is one of the greatest letters I've seen here with respect to us approving this. So I wanted to just wish Hannah the best. So she's going to be joining the Army and is going to be a future doctor. Thank you so very much for this letter. It's excellent, and I wholeheartedly approve this. So thank you, and our best of luck to Hannah.
I would concur, Mr. Dean. I was going to mention the same thing, that she did a great job and obviously has a very clear plan and set of goals in front of her. So congratulations to Hannah, and we wish her the best.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
I recommend that the enclosed list of Geneva High School students be approved for graduation, providing they meet the state of Ohio and Geneva Area City School District diploma requirements.
So moved.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
I recommend that the board approve the curriculum recommendation for 2021-22 as presented in the attached summary.
Was there a motion? I'm sorry.
There was a motion,
I will second.
and it was Mrs. Metzler moved to approve. We needed,
Mr. Dana, second.
okay. So any discussion?
I have one question. Are we teaching CRT in this curriculum?
We are not. Again, we're teaching very traditional, through our social studies and civics and political science, very traditional standards, the approved standards that are in the student state. That question did come up, and we are not. Again, we do provide or the ability for students to share opinions and viewpoints and things, but again, we try to keep it controlled within the classroom. There's lots of information out there on social media, lots of information that they're hearing through various media sources, but again, we try to keep it to a very standard traditional approach.
So we are not teaching it in our classroom.
That's correct.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I did not hear the question and your response, Eric, so I'm sorry. Can you speak in the mic, please?
Did not hear your question.
What was that, Richard?
So I did not hear the question or Eric's response. So Eric was turning to you to respond, so I couldn't hear from his microphone. So Eric, could you just speak in the microphone? Could you just relay the question and your response, please?
I asked if we were teaching CRT in this new curriculum that we're discussing right now.
Okay. And Eric?
And I responded, no, we are not. Again, we go off the Ohio standards and again, teach traditional standards, but that is not part of our course curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. So the the social studies curriculum shows copyright of 2018, so that's 3 years old at this point, right? My understanding that.
Yes, I believe so. Those books were copyrighted in
Okay.
2018. Yes.
So when the subscription shows 6 years, that is what we're paying for in order to have this for 6 years.
That would be starting this year. We would have any materials, any online materials available to us for 6 years moving forward.
Okay, so that's not like an expiration date of, say, the 2018 copyrighted information is only good till 2024.
No. And a lot of the companies now have shifted to providing many online resources. So this subscription was for a 6-year period, starting when we receive it.
Okay. And then a different question, I saw that psychology and sociology are included in this. Do we have many students taking those classes?
We have about 3 sections of each every year.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Metzler had asked about psychology and sociology, how many students. Mr. Weatherholt said we have about 3 sections each year.
Did you hear that, Mr. Dana?
I did, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler? Yes. Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Mr. Dana?
Yes.
I recommend the approval of the revised pay participate policy and fee payment form to take effect for the 2021-22 school year.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes. I recommend that the board approve the enclosed student athletic policy handbook for the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
Discussion?
Only comment I'll have is with respect to the last page here about social media guidelines. Just note that there is a case currently in the United States Supreme Court regarding the Mahanoy Area School District. It was argued in April. I don't know when they're going to have a decision on that, but that decision and a very interesting debate among the Supreme Court justices that might have an impact here on that social media policy. That's obviously something we can revisit based on what occurs from that case.
Thank you for sharing that.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Arndt?
No.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Metzler?
I recommend that the board approve the enclosed elementary school handbook for the 2021-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Metzler?
I recommend that the board approve the middle school student handbook for the 21-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler? And Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
I recommend the board approve the enclosed high school student handbook for the 21-22 school year.
I thought I heard a motion, and if so, I'll second here.
Yes. Discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler? Yes. Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Mr. Dana?
Yes.
I recommend the approval of revision 1 of the 5-year forecast and and assumptions for fiscal years 21 through 25 as a projection of revenues and expenditures to be submitted to the Ohio Department of Education and Auditor of State as required by H. Bill 412.
So moved.
I'll second. I'll just note, for purposes of discussion here, I am concerned about issues of inflation with in April, the consumer price index going up at a staggering 4.2%. And anyone who's had to buy lumber or other, supplies, it's outlandish. So just, it shows a rosy picture or a rosier picture in our budget. I hope it lasts.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
If you would, I will highlight a few things. And Mr. Markajon is going to put up the 5-year forecast on the Zoom, share his screen, so anybody looking at home can see the numbers. The board, you received this via email and you have a hard copy tonight. So I just want to highlight what we originally thought would happen at the beginning of the school year with COVID and what we were hearing from so-called experts at the state level didn't necessarily materialize. As we said before, our property taxes, the line 1.010 on the forecast, did not drop. They were projecting a 10% reduction in collection. And instead we had increases. So those numbers have been, the number for this year was increased, and then the increases each year after every year shows a little bit of increase in collections. So we actually collected much more in fiscal year 2021 than we did in 2020, than we did in 2019. The income tax. Now, this is an area where we did receive less than we had originally forecasted, but it wasn't the 7.5% that we were hearing again from state experts. Instead, it ended up being about 5.1%. So there was money to add back in there. And because we were showing a 7.5% reduction for this year and then a 3% reduction for next year, we lowered that reduction to 2%. And then we show small increases after that. The unrestricted grants, state grants and aids on line 1.035, we mentioned before in Mrs. Metzler's legislative report how the state reduced the reduction that was originally announced for this year. So that threw some money back in this year. And we made no change to what we were showing. Unfortunately, we don't know what's going to happen in the biennial budget. So we don't know what state funding is going to look like next year until this biennial budget passes. If the Fair School Funding Plan passes, we stand to receive some additional funds there. But if it doesn't, it's probably going to be more of the same where we're on a guarantee. So the rest of the years they're flatline on state aid. No change in restricted grants and aids. Property tax allocations, since they usually try to run that as a percentage of collections, that increased only slightly. Actually, in the whole 5 years, it increased $2,793 over what it was previously. And then for all other revenues, there were some increases there also. Interest earnings were up a little more this year, as well as the mobile homes tax collections. So all in all, on the revenue side, when you look at all 5 years, we're adding almost $1 million in revenue to the forecast. And based on what happened this year, not seeing that, obviously there's always inherent risk in a forecast. If things don't happen as we have assumed in these assumptions, then they can be different. But with the information we have, this is what we think it's going to look like. On the expense side, we continue to benefit from several things: the student wellness and success funds, the ESSER funds, CRF and broadband connectivity, all things that enabled us to survive the pandemic so far without putting stress on our general fund. Matter of fact, it has actually saved us money because of the expenses we were able to move in there that may have come out of the general fund. We've been able to restore some positions. We've been able to take care of all the overtime generated from the pandemic, having people in the classroom while teachers were teaching home, paid out of our ESSER funds. We're able to have a little connectivity with the different hotspots and the Wi-Fi access points at our buildings at no cost to the general fund. So we've actually seen some reductions there, lowering our personal services, our salaries and wages, our bridges, and our purchase services for this year. And since we kind of look at what and forecast what the increases are going to be, that obviously reduces the cost going forward. So all in all, we're showing over $4.4 million in reductions on those three lines. And a lot of the savings related to that. And then unfortunately, another place the savings are coming because we have a lack of subs. You know, we don't have the number of bus drivers that we anticipated that were factored in here when we restored transportation. We thought we'd go back to the same number of drivers we had. We lost some. They didn't return. We have not been able to hire new. So instead of having subs to fill those routes and instead of paying for 3 additional bus drivers, we're having to move bus drivers around to get the kids to and from school. I mean, it's not the best scenario, but it has impacted the 5-year forecast. When we were online for a period of time, we had no substituted staff. So there are different things that have affected the expenditure side. So what you see here is a 5-year forecast that has cash balances at the end of the year that we've never seen before. The highest cash balance Geneva has seen in the 27 years I've been here is $5.3 million as a carryover balance. And then not long after that, our expenditures exceeded revenues for 8 out of 9 years. And we went down to where we were forced to go to the ballot. We failed, and we had to make cuts until we finally passed the school district income tax levy. So as I say, there are inherent risks. And one of the things that the board needs to keep in mind, and I have mentioned in the 5-year forecast, is that when ESSER and student wellness and success funds run out, the district is going to need to be in a position to either absorb the reinstated and new positions funded by those sources, outside sources, or make cuts. So what I'm telling you is that that balance is necessary to build now, because when those funds go, if we eventually add we're already adding it here in elementary physics, but it's going to be funded through these other funds. We've added 2 housekeepers that will continue, and we've increased their time. We are adding, or hope to add, eventually an elementary guidance counselor. And there are some other positions that will be brought back using those funds. So when we get out past year 2025, because we think those funds will cover us, so none of those positions currently hit this forecast. When we get out past 2025, we need to be in a position that either those positions can now be funded from the general fund and not run us out of money, be sustainable, or we're back to the place where we were before, where we have a position to keep from running our cash balance down to bare bones. So that's basically what you see. All the changes are highlighted in your assumptions and highlighted on the forecast. I will point out one more thing, and from Mrs. Metzler's legislative report about the government approving the seamless summer option program again. That is not necessarily good for our school district financially. The National School Lunch Program allows us to have a free and reduced program for those lunches that we serve. And while we're serving those, we usually also have people paying for lunches. buying a la carte items. And it's under that scenario that the lunchroom gets the most revenue. With the SSO, everybody eats free, but with those people that might not be in and online, if they don't come and pick up, we miss them. We also miss the a la carte items. So due to that, you saw in your lunchroom report in your packets that we currently have $164,000 negative cash balance in the lunchroom fund. Again, something that we've never seen that high. It's come down the last month or two, and it'll continue to come down a little bit, but I'm not sure where it's going to end up. Because of that, and because of a larger transfer that will be needed to athletics, because nobody was able to pay to go and see games, very limited spectators. So our revenues into the athletic fund were very low, but we still had all the sports, we still had all the transportation, we still had all the officials. Where last year we transferred $101,602, it's looking right now that between those two transfers, it could be around $210,000, and hopefully not higher. So that the hope is that after this, things will get back to a little bit normal. Maybe by 2023, we'll be back on the National School Lunch Program. So I show the need for transfers out diminishing over time. And hopefully that happens. But as long as they keep this single summer option, the only choice we have to serve breakfast and school lunches, everybody eats free, and we're dependent on those online kids coming in picking up their lunch. If we still have this year, we have, and they're not all coming in. Kids are off on Wednesdays, they're not all coming in. Next year, we hope to be back 5 days a week, but that give us that Wednesday revenue. So,
Can I ask on that lunchroom topic, are we able to use the ESSER funds to transfer the money into the lunchroom fund?
it is possible to look into that. Again, we have to budget, and we can't spend that money until we approve the budget. And if we follow the reasons that are allowed, yes, revenue loss is one of those reasons. You can displace funding. So it may be that we can compensate the lunchroom for some of those losses.
And I remember, when I visited with Mrs. Jones, I remember her telling me about the increased cost of having to package food that they didn't used to have to package before because of COVID. So I was thinking that maybe that would qualify that and help offset.
Yes, it's possible. But again, we won't know. We have to have a budget approved before we can spend that money. It's May 19th. If that's not done by the end of this year, we won't see that money this year. We may get the reimbursement in a different year, so it will still be necessary to transfer those funds straight to zero. We may be able to then reimburse.
So, Kevin, there's a couple things I'd like to say. First of all, and this is related to your earlier, report talking about what's occurring in Columbus. Thank you for the time that you spend going down into Columbus, attempting to meet with legislators and talking about the need to reform the school funding situation. I'm sorry that there weren't more persons available to hear your testimony at the committee meeting. But I thank you, very much for your efforts here on that, and they do not go unnoticed. Obviously we have still a lot of questions here, about what that final package is going to look like here from the state, and also what Mrs. Metzler mentioned here about House Bill 290. If that's something that goes through, that could be a hit that we face here on our budget here with respect to the state finances. So, while this is as I mentioned, a rosier, picture, I mean, this is the first time I've actually seen, little red here on a 5-year forecast, which is, perhaps a miracle. I'm always, though, just, I recognize that it's fleeting. When we talk about the situation of inflation, when we talk about turning from a $22 million operation back in 2018 to a $27.5 million operation here at the end of the 5-year forecast, we have some concerns on this budget here with respect to what occurs with those loss of the ESSER funds. And I will just say, I'm approaching here my 8th year here on the board, and the saddest moment I had was when we looked at, hey, we got a cash balance, let's spend it, and then getting into a situation where we couldn't pay our bills, or there was a fear we wouldn't be able to pay our bills, and we had to let people go. And I know all of us have been we've been dealing with situations with the state budget. Kevin, I know you've been driving down to Columbus. You get the award for the longest drive of the persons that are presenting testimony. But at some point, this board is going to have a policy about what it is we want to seek in a cash balance. And as our expenses, our budget goes from 22 million to 27.5, we're going to need to have a larger cash balance in place to deal with emergencies that come up. If there's anything that we learned from 07, 08, the COVID situation, we got to have that reserve balance here in place. And at some point, we're going to have to discuss that as a board. But those are my comments. So thank you.
Any other comments? Roll call.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
And Ms. Fisher?
Yes. I recommend the board approve the disposal of the attached list of assets.
So moved.
Discussion?
Yeah. The third page, we have a 2008 dump truck, followed by a 2008 landscape trailer. Go down a little bit, we have a 2010 truck. And then you flip it over 2 more pages, 3/4 of the way down, we have a maintenance van that's a 2011. So the oldest vehicle on here is a 2008, the dump and the trailer. If we're getting rid of these, what are we going to do to replace them?
Those are part of our disposal list. We had looked at those vehicles to actually see what we could get on trade-in when we were looking at some additional vehicles to replace those. After we got the trade-in price, Mr. Lillie, myself, Mr. Curran, and Mr. Regard went through the public surplus trading so that we would have that auction site available to us. So the plan is to put those vehicles onto the auction site and see if we can get more than we could for the trade-in. This is a nationwide, actually worldwide site that has had great success. We thought it was prudent to at least try to see what we could get. We could put a base price on there. We know what we would receive to trade in. And then if we can't receive any more from that site, then we know what we could get for trade-in to get new vehicles.
So I'm to assume right now that these vehicles are not being utilized at all in our school. They're sitting in the corner lot and no one's driving.
That's not correct. We still are using them. Some of them need some repairs. If we were going to continue to use them, we didn't want to sink additional money in if we could either trade in or possibly auction them off.
So we know we don't have money. We need counselors, we need teachers, we need everything. We're going to get rid of vehicles that we're using right now that we don't, they're maintenance vehicles. The oldest one is 14 years. That's newer than the vehicle I drive. Why are we getting rid of them? Are the maintenance costs astronomical? Is one of these the van that's sitting in Madison right now for maintenance? That's not in our school district.
I don't know, Mr. Arndt.
Okay.
Mr. Kujalo would have to answer that question of financing, but Eric, you need to explain.
I can't hear you, Eric.
Eric, you need to explain that two of the vehicles, we will be purchasing newer vehicles to replace them. But the trailer and the dump truck, they do not wish to replace, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so not all the vehicles will be replaced. There is a plan to replace two of the vehicles out of the trade-in or the action money that would be received for the 4 vehicles that we would be getting rid of.
So the question about that is, are we being saturated with astronomical costs on maintenance for these vehicles? Or is it just we want new vehicles?
Mr. Arndt, we never get rid of vehicles just because we want new vehicles.
I'm not, this is different
I'm
than
just,
school buses.
I'm assuring you,
These are maintenance vehicles
right.
that do very little.
No, they drive around and they get beat up pretty good. And one, as Mr. Kujalo alluded to, is gonna require a lot of money if we sink into it now for repair. And it made more sense to buy new. So I believe the plan is to replace the pickup truck and to replace the maintenance vehicle. But they no longer see a need to keep the dump truck. And we have other trailers that they don't need this landscape trailer. I do not believe that the plan is to replace that. Is that correct, Mr. Kujalo?
I believe so, yes.
And what Mr. Kujala mentioned about this public auction site, the last time we sold a bus and did it through a public auction company, we had to pay 25% fee to that company. And so the bus sold for $2,000, we got $1,600. The nice thing about public surplus is that there is no fee to us. They pass the fee on to the buyer. This is a very active site. It's national. More people look at it. We can also put links on our website to these. So the hope is that we get more money for our trade-ins or items that we've auctioned off in the past than what we've received in the past. But the money we get from that is not going to cover the cost of a new vehicle. We regulate, just like we try to buy buses, we have to replace vehicles every now and then. And the pickup that we're replacing has issues as well as the maintenance thing.
But we have a certified mechanic that works in our bus drive that can work on these vehicles. And two of these vehicles, not the dump truck or the trailer, but two of the vehicles are not surplus. They're being used. So when we get rid of them on a surplus site, we have to replace them vehicles, which is going to be additional cost. Can we afford to buy a new van and a new truck right now?
This is what we use permanent improvement funds for. So again, this expense doesn't come out of our general fund. Just like we use the permanent improvement fund to purchase buses. So the money for capital purchases is there. And we haven't purchased any new vehicles like this for some time. So I'm just going on what they meet with your superintendent, and the decision has been made that we need to replace two of those vehicles and that they no longer need the other two. But I wasn't in on those conversations. But I asked that we try to use this public auction site to see if we can get more money on the vehicles rather than trading them in. And since we know how much we can get for the trade-ins, we can see how much, if we can garner more back from the public auction. But I am being told that the two vehicles need to be replaced. And the other ones, we're driving them because we don't want to have them sitting there and other things happen to them before we're able to put them out to auction, especially the dump truck. But I'm being told that we no longer have a use for the dump truck.
Then that would make sense for us to get rid of that. It does equipment no good to sit. Anybody that's familiar with equipment knows that. However, we have a mechanic, a truck and a van that they're basic vehicles. Our mechanic can work on it. And as long as they're not tearing us up with transmissions and motors and everything else, it's common maintenance. We can keep them going. I can't see getting rid of two vehicles that we use, not school buses. Your game plan with school buses, Kevin, has always kept us straight and it's always kept our children safe. And I appreciate you keeping us on that plan. But two vehicles like the van and the pickup, I can't see a reason to get rid of them. That's all I have. Thank you.
So, Eric, I will just give a couple 2 cents here on this. I, like Mr. Arndt, I drive my 2007 Ford, but I bought it from a little old lady in Pasadena, honest, has low mileage. And so sometimes it's not the age, it's the mileage, it's the wear and tear on the vehicle. So from what I'm hearing from you is that these vehicles are not in the best of shape and they have higher mileage, because we deal with this issue when we deal with buses. Some of the buses that we replace are 10 plus years old. They have, they're approaching 200,000 miles. Can you just give us like a little bit of information here about what perhaps the condition and the mileage is of those vehicles in question, just so that we know?
I'll have to get that information for you. Again, I can give you mileage, what some of the repairs are needed. We're looking at obviously trading in some vehicles to get 2 brand new ones. We use those vehicles for plowing, turnarounds, numerous turnarounds in different areas of the district. But I will get that information for you and I can provide that for you.
And is this something where this auction here, where we get the better sale price and less of a fee, is this something that's ongoing, or is this a now or never situation?
No, it's ongoing. That's why we went through the training for that. Once we're trained, once we have our membership number for the district, then we can go onto that site anytime we might have something that could be auctioned and put it on that site.
So at this point, where for purposes of this motion, are we going to pull those vehicles in question? We'll have you dispose of the other items, but we'll wait to get other information before dealing with those items that Mr. Arndt has raised. Is that what I'm hearing as far as a modified motion, or no?
I think I got part of what you said, Richard.
I'm sorry, you couldn't hear me? I'm sorry. My question here is that, do we want to amend the motion from which to allow for the sale of all the items except for the vehicles in question that you've asked about until we get more information?
That's correct, which was the van and the pickup truck.
Okay.
The dump truck and the trailer. Yes, I can understand. But I watched them use that trailer. I watched them use the trailer in the parking lot when we had one of our bus drivers drive over a light pole.
Okay, so other than the dump truck and the trailer, we'll then dispose of the other items. Is that correct?
Say it again.
Other than the dump truck and the trailer, we would then dispose of the other items on this list. Is that correct? Or give the authorization for that?
No, I would not dispose of the van and the pickup. Those are the main ones.
He's just looking at the van and pickup as being items that we've removed.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't hear that. So do we have an amended motion here on the floor that we can then seek a second to then approve?
Yes, I'll amend the motion to that.
Well, Mr. Dana, you made the motion. So if you want to amend that motion to remove.
I would seek to amend that motion then.
And then Mrs. Metzler seconded. Do you agree with that amendment?
Sure, yes.
Okay, then we will remove those 2 items from the list and ask that the board approve the remaining items for disposal.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I just want to be clear. So the phrasing is some items to be traded in or sold at public auction. Are we only talking about the vehicles that would be traded in, or are there other things on this list that could be traded?
I think everything on the list except for the vehicle to be disposed of, we're looking at either a trade-in or the public auction for just the vehicles themselves.
Actually, we will be looking to see if any of these items can be sold at public auction. We are told during our training on how to use the site that many people put scrap on it. Even now, right now, we try to get money for scrap. We can't always do that. Sometimes the value of the scrap outweighs the cost of picking it up, and other times we just break even. So Mr. Begard will be handling most of that technology and things and determining what he wants to try to post on the site. And we're definitely going to try, for whatever vehicles are approved for disposal, to put those on the site. But we will be trying to use this site as much as possible to see what we can get money for.
Okay, so given that that's the case, I don't know if you typically, in a case like this, come back and let the board know what you were able to get on anything that you sold or traded or anything like that. But if we're going to use this new public auction site, I would ask that when that's done, that we be informed of how successful it was.
We certainly can.
And then also I'd like to know the condition, and I'm looking at the sheet, it shows like the category status and condition. I'm assuming that the G for condition is good. And everything on this list shows good.
That is the condition that was probably in there, but Mr. Kujala might have to speak to this as far as what this department shared. But a lot of these things have met their end of life. If they're a computer, a laptop, the servers and so on. The monitors might be the old big monitors that we replaced with flat screens.
Yeah, a lot of these are CRT monitors, the larger monitors. They're working condition, so they're good, and you probably rate them that way, but they may not be usable anymore.
And I want to be clear, I am not disagreeing with the fact that we need to get rid of some of our older equipment in favor of newer equipment. I understand the purpose behind that. I just think that maybe we as a board, and I will only speak for myself, but maybe need clarification on some of the dispositions of these items as they show up on these lists. I mean, my question would be the condition, as I just asked, and I also had the same concerns about the vehicles that Mr. Arndt brought up. So I think that I maybe we would just like a little bit more information in the future when these lists come forward to let us know how this is being determined and what the plan is.
And just to clarify again, that condition, that was just the field on that item that was probably filled out that when we had it, was good. Nobody tells my accounts payable person who administers this that, okay, we need to change that to fair or poor or broken down or whatever. So that's why it's going to show good, because that's what it was when it was usable. You know, it's not something that we've given attention to change based on the actual condition, and nobody's reporting it. So.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Number 14, I recommend the following personnel actions for the contract year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just as far as for comments, just want to thank Mr. Horvath for his 36 years of service here to the district, and then also to Mr. Noble, 28 years, and our thoughts and prayers are with you. So I just wanted to note the number of years of service of those people in particular. So our thanks from the board to those individuals.
I have a concern with 14E. We have someone there that we pay a teaching salary of $68,000 a year that teaches one class a day. That's one class a day for $68,000. Then we give that individual another, I think it's $8,000 or $9,000 for additional duties as athletic coordinator. And because they have to work a little bit to coordinate an event that happens every once on a blue moon here in our county, we want to pay an additional $187.50. At one time, and we have, what makes sense here? I think we pay enough already. And I can't see paying an additional, even though it's $187, $187 for some people is a lot of money. I believe it's due. It's in the job description. It comes around, so I have an issue with that.
You posed a question to me, and I did respond that this was the all county track meet. It's something that comes around each district once every 7 years. I will be finding out some additional information from other schools to see how they address this. But these are huge meets. They require extensive time, a lot of times outside the required hours or the hours that even an athletic director might perform. For planning, getting officials, setting up the various pages. You're not setting up the pages just for your school. You're setting up the pages for the events and after the events are over for all of the schools that were involved. Getting workers. I mean, we had to get all of our own workers. And one of the things that even added to that this year is we were not able to post that at Spire because of conflict in schedule. So we not only had to move equipment to Lakeside and host it at Lakeside. Lakeside was gracious enough to at least allow us to use their outdoor track facility. So we had to move everything that we had to take as a school and a district to host that meet at Lakeside track due to the conflict. So again, it was presented to me. I realized that there were a lot of additional hours and work that was put in. And one of the reasons that I made the recommendation.
I would also like to inform the board that other tournaments, for instance, when we host an OHSAA tournament, the OHSAA provides a $40 stipend for any of those football games that we hosted this year, soccer, basketball, when we host a contest. They pay $40 to the tournament manager because they realize that it's not the normal course of operation. It's kind of an over and above thing. Also, our conference, the CBC, pays directly from the conference to any individuals that run a tournament as a tournament manager. So there are those tournaments that are being covered by OHSA, who reimburses the district, and for the CBC, who pays them directly, because they recognize that handling these tournaments is something that's generally over and above and not within the job description for those athletic directors, who are most of the people that are usually going to run the tournament that is hosted. And just so you're aware.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Arndt,
No.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
Ms. Fisher, if I could just have a moment, I wanted to wait until you completed the approval for this item. I just wanted to briefly share a couple comments for our 2 retirees. Mr. Horvath's been with the Geneva Schools for 36 years. He also served 2 years with the Ashtabula City School to begin his career. He has filled numerous roles during his time and helped transition the district through some challenging times. Mr. Horvath has impacted many in a positive way over his years in Geneva. His knowledge and talents have helped support the goals of the district and move us forward. We thank Mr. Horvath for his years of service and dedication to Geneva Schools, and we wish him the best in his retirement. And then Mr. Noble has been with the Geneva Schools for 28 years. I met Mr. Noble when I returned to Geneva as a teacher in 1992-93 at the Geneva Junior High School building. Mr. Noble's years at the junior high and middle school, along with his various coaching duties, have made an impact on many students and families. These last few years have been difficult with the health issues he has faced, but through it all, Mr. Noble has continued to always share his passion for teaching, love for the students, staff, and families of Geneva, and of course, his love for the Eagles. Best wishes to Mr. Noble and his family.
Thank you. I recommend the following personnel actions for 2021. This is number 15, change of contract.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes,
Ms. Metzler, and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
I recommend the reinstatement of the following position for the 21-22 school year. Middle school family and consumer science and wellness and nutrition teacher.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion?
What's their job? What are they gonna do?
We're leaving some options open here. We had a family consumer person before in which they used the lab and taught students about nutrition, taught them the basics of cooking and other areas of taking care of a home, taking care of lifestyle issues that you may face. If we're going a little bit more towards wellness and nutrition, it would be similar in content, but we may also include more physical activities, life choices, things that may impact you, such as drugs and alcohol, to include some of that as part of the curriculum development.
So every child in our middle school will interact with this individual one time or another?
This would be I think the way that Mr. Anderson has it planned is that it would be a semester course, a half a year. And they go on a rotational basis.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler. Yes. Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
and Mr. Dana.
Yes.
Okay, over.
I was able to meet with Mr. Bernard at the end of April, part of my building departments. And we had a really good visit. I talked to him for a couple of hours and I kind of got a feel for his responsibilities because I was a little unclear, having never met him before, what his responsibilities are. And we talked about some of the more pressing issues that he deals with in his department. And one of the big things that he stressed to me was the huge need to replace the cameras within our schools. He talked about replacing 4 buildings with cameras, not the high school, he said those were newer, but the other 4 buildings, he had priced that out, including the software, and had even wondered if maybe the ESSER funds might be able to cover that. He was in the process of getting some information together to present that. But that was one of the things that he mentioned as a more pressing need, and we'd be reducing the amount of cameras in the schools with giving us better views with the cameras that he would be purchasing. So we talked at length about that. He talked to me about the desktops that the teachers are using, that they're 9 years old, and some of them have the end-of-life Chromebooks that they're using as well when they were needing to Zoom with their students. So that is something that he said, as a board and as a district, we need to start thinking about because they're going to need to be replaced in the next 5 years. We need to come up with a plan to manage those funds to get to that point. He also talked about the servers, needing new servers at the elementary schools, and about how much the cost of those are and how many years you can get out of those. He said they're good for about 4 or 5 years. And the youngest one that we have is 9 years old. So in my discussion with him, we talked about some of the technology needs that our schools have to stay up to date and not run into problems where we're scrambling to fix them. And he also talked about the Chromebooks that we recently purchased. He said a lot of other schools have their students pay a tech fee at the beginning of the school year that kind of covers maybe the use of those Chromebooks. And then the students keep them all year round, and they can keep them for all the years that they're in school. And then because they've paid that tech fee every year, we just end up keeping them. And that might be an option for us to consider so that we don't have so many end-of-life Chromebooks coming up for us to dispose of. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thought that I'm not sure how much talk there has been behind the scenes with him and Mr. Kujula about that, but I thought that was pretty interesting. And then also he talked about the Wi-Fi in the buildings that were end of life in 2018, and he was waiting on FCC approval for some of those. And I think what he was telling me is that some of that replacement started for the Wi-Fi, I guess their connection points or whatever in the schools, but that was paid for with the COVID ESSER funds. And he was saying that he noticed a big difference in the high school when all of those went into place. So he was very informative about the projects that he works on. He seems like he's got a very good grip on everything that he's responsible for. He is the type of person that spends the school's money as he spends his own money. He doesn't overspend. He's pretty frugal. He looks for the best deals. I felt very comfortable when he was telling me that this is the type of person that he is. Thought overall it was a really great visit. I was happy to meet with him. And then I met with the court PTO this month. I believe it was their last meeting. And I just kind of stopped in to see if any of the parents or any of the attendees had any questions for me as a board member, any concerns, and to tell me how they thought that the school year went. And the ladies that were there really kind of all agreed that the families thought that the teachers did a really great job through the pandemic, that they put lots of tireless effort in receiving emails at 11 o'clock at night, wondering how are these teachers even getting any sleep. So they were very complimentary of our teachers at Corp. And they did ask me questions about for next year, if the plan was to go back to 5 days a week next year, and if the online would still be an option that was available. So I reiterated what we've been talking about in the last few board meetings about our plan for next year. What impressed me was that even though this year was kind of complicated, the PTO actually went ahead with a flower sale, spiritware sale. I mean, they did a lot of the same things that they would do in a normal year. And I think that really probably helped the children and the families to feel like, okay, we're moving towards something that's more normal. So I really compliment the PTO for keeping those activities going in a year that was so difficult. And, you know, like they told me I could come back whenever I'd like, which was very nice of them to give me that invitation, but it was really good to meet with them. And I was hoping to get into work this month. It was very busy with testing, so that may not happen this month. And I will be on the Oscar PTO meeting next week to kind of do the same thing with Oscar that I did with Corp. I missed GPS's last PTO meeting, but I do have a contact there that I will get in touch with to see what some of their families thought. So again, I thank everybody for welcoming me into their groups, into their buildings, into their departments. It's been very enlightening.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I did have one item that I wanted to share just to give you a brief update for the summer school program and intervention. The decision was made to run the elementary program the 2 weeks in June, and that's posted on the website, in 1 week in August, which will be a readiness week, and those dates are posted again on the website. We've been getting information out for the elementary level to parents for the students that are eligible, and again, trying to get them to commit. There will be no July session for the elementary and middle school. We looked at numbers, and without having the availability of transportation, we decided that we wouldn't have a July session for our elementary and middle school. Middle school will have a 2-week session in June only. And then currently for elementary, we're looking at about 75 students for the June session. And again, that's all 3 buildings, and 59 students that are interested in the August readiness session. So those are kind of our rough numbers right now. We do have that broken down by grade levels. Middle school has about 60 students for June. So June will be a busy month for transporting those students, along with we're going to be trying to provide breakfast and lunch for those students during that time period. The high school is still accepting enrollments for this summer program and credit recovery, and it looks like they'll have sufficient numbers for June and July. August, it's still up in the air. Again, theirs is a little different in that they're looking at the students that they can combine in certain courses to teach them. And again, trying to get the best, the most efficient way to get those students in credit recovery so that you have enough for that teacher. It's always an interesting month at the high school because if there are students that are failing courses, this is the month of negotiations. Many of the students are negotiating with their teachers, trying to find out what they might be able to do to possibly pass. What work could they still complete if there's something that they might still be able to get in. So I think this is always that month of negotiations. But finally, as we were trying to press a little bit for numbers, guidance and administration finally started pulling in students and letting them know that there wasn't a chance they were going to pass, and starting to get some of those students registered for the summer program. And even with that, I think we have some students that are still hanging on hope that they may pass and waiting for those grades to be posted. So we may even have some late enrollments. We will be posting for our certified teachers and transportation drivers this Friday. And again, hopefully we'll fill all those necessary positions so that we can continue with our plans for the summer program. And it looks like we have students. Once we get those teachers filled, then we'll be able to finalize any last details for the summer program. I just wanted to give you a quick update.
Mrs. Metzler, when Mr. Regard talked to you about cameras, did he happen to discuss or bring up cameras inside the bus garage?
In the bus garage itself, no, no, he did not.
Okay, okay, thank you. That's also been a concern of I'll say many, because it's been brought to my attention by many, on cameras in the bus garage. We have them in all our schools, but we don't have them in the bus garage.
We added cameras to the bus garage last year. We have them on the various locations, so you can see the buses coming in through the gate. You can see all the open gate areas. You can see the entrance from the front, and you can see the bay doors where the buses are coming in.
I mean the activity inside the bus garage, meaning we have them here in the hallway, the cafeteria, and here, everywhere you go in the school, we have cameras. We don't have them in our bus garage. Movement of the buses outside is important for insurance, for theft, for all kinds of things. But also cameras inside, looking at work throughput, what's being done inside the bus garage. And it's been brought up for 2 years now. That's why I asked if the concern was for cameras inside the bus stop. My second thing is, we have GPSs in all of our buses.
That's correct.
And why do we have GPSs in our buses?
We can determine where they are at any given time during the route.
Then why can't we get GPSs in our school, our district-owned vehicles, a van, a pickup? Why can't we record those workers in those vehicles the same way we record a school bus?
We have a service that we purchase for the GPS equipment that goes into the school buses, and a service that we use then to locate those buses as they move throughout the district. We have not put any in our other school vehicles, but we can definitely look into that.
I mean, it's not in the too hard category, we just never attempted to do it.
We have not, no.
The third thing, middle school mowing. The high school has a lot of property here, and I think a lot of people understand that the middle school has a lot of property. Their mowing is divided up in two parts. Maintenance does one part with commercial grade zero mowers. We have one custodian that will spend 3 or 4 days of continuous mowing all day long to mow the part that the middle school is responsible for. why are we taking a custodian out of a building and making that individual mow for 3 or 4 days straight just to finish? And at this time of year, you just got to turn around and start again. But then we have another custodian, a night shift or afternoon shift, who has to do the weed eating, but also has the duties on the inside of the building, so doesn't do the weed eating on the outside. If they got that big of an area, they're not using a commercial mower, they're using a regular homeowner's John Deere, probably bought at Lowe's, to mow. It goes probably 3/4 of a mile an hour. It goes on and on and on. So employees want to know why we can allocate one individual to mow grass for 3 days, sometimes 4, when we have commercial mowers available to us, and our maintenance mows the other part of it.
I'd have to look at that a little bit more. I saw the email that was sent out. I don't agree that it's 4 days straight. I think there's partial days that are used, and some of that sometimes is weather dependent, but I can definitely get more details for you. That's how it was set up. Part of it was done by maintenance. Part of it was done by the building custodial. It was a smaller mower because of the area that they typically mow around the building. But I mean, definitely it could be something that we can look at if we're looking at some time crunches, especially for the other duties that they have to fill within the building.
So the time crunch is just one thing. It's a waste of an asset. The individual, the custodian, he's spending that amount of time mowing the grass. He knows it's always going to grow. We're taking that individual away from the duties that are inside the building. Dirty air vents. Broken this, broken that, trash here. We outsource most of our mowing at the high school. I'm sure maintenance does some up there.
Maintenance does all the athletic fields at the high school. We take care of our own athletic fields. We outsource the other mowing for that's around the building, the property that we own. It's a much larger property. The maintenance department does all of the property that's near the tennis court, all the athletic fields that are in the back. The custodial person handles anything that is towards the school, along the drive, the bus drive that's on the north side, and then also the south side of the property that would be by the apartment complex in that small ditch area, retaining area that's right in the center of the property. Everything really in front of the parking lot. Front of the main parking lot.
I wonder how hard it would be just to tag that bit that you have to mow and go onto the contract we have for the high school and get the custodian back to the school where he belongs.
We can definitely look at it.
That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, at this time, we will have the second hearing of the public. If there's anyone who has any comments, please start by stating your name and address. Okay, I recommend that the board hold an executive session for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment, and to consider the purchase of property for public purposes or for the sale of property in competitive building. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Metzler? Yes. Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
And Ms. Bishop?
Yes. We will be going into executive session now. We will not be coming back. There will be no action taken during the executive session. Thank you for attending.
We might have a few minutes here.
I could not hear you, Eric. What was that?
I turned you off. You can go ahead and unmute you.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Eric?
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear? Yeah, we might just have just a few minutes here as we kind of transition and use the restroom.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have a chair for Terry?
Yeah, we have some chairs back here, but.
Come on.
I don't think they brought all of them up because of the.
Yeah.